Okay, welcome everybody to College, the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Carpenter. I'm joined today by Peggy Keogh, our Director of Financial Aid, otherwise known as the Fairy Godmother of Financial Aid, otherwise known as the Budget Queen. Kind of three big talking points that we spend time on today. Number one, just the latest and greatest state of affairs in higher education, specifically what have we learned with what's been imposed at Harvard, what have we learned with what's happening with the Senate now that the ball is in their court. We do a quick debrief there. Then we spend a lot of time talking about a recent article in the New York Times that focuses on Syracuse's pricing strategy this year, and specifically going after students that did not commit to Syracuse, trying to give them massive discounts as a way to get them to leave the school that they had committed to and come to Syracuse. So we'll talk about that along with other colleges. This was Syracuse that got picked on in this article, maybe a little bit unfairly, but we'll talk about other schools as well, which leads us to our third talking point, was just colleges' pricing strategy in general. This was a great segue that yes, the microscope got shined on Syracuse, but let's use this as an opportunity to talk about how all colleges, price their schools and, more importantly, discount their schools. And based on that knowledge, how can your family figure out where you're going to get the most meaningful discounts? Okay, Peggy, happy Monday. We don't usually do this Monday morning.
I know. Bright and early for me, although, you know me, I'm up at 5 a.m. calling you.
We spoke it, quite early your times. Hopefully a good weekend. I saw the dog got in the water. That's big time.
We had to kick her out of the water last night. It's like, okay, Ash, you're huffing and puffing. You got to get out. Yeah.
Careful
We've
what you
created
wish
a
for.
monster now.
Yeah, it's officially summer here, so which is nice. First nice weekend of the entire summer. We're probably on the beach for 15 hours this weekend, maybe more.
Are you going to get this? What are they calling it? A heat dome? Is that going to get up as far north
Heat
as
wave,
you?
it's uncomfortable already today. That's why I'm not in the office, because the office is like the AC's like touch and go, central air, whatever at best. So like, you remember I was pouring sweat last week, right? So again, I'm probably going to be doing that to an extent today, but it's a little bit cooler at my house. So okay, Peggy. Well, for the tasks at hand here today, I mean, we just wanted to start a little bit. I mean, I think we have kind of some kind of cool, interesting subject matter to talk about this week that kind of we've been talking about a lot internally. We even probably mentioned it on this podcast a couple of times, but just how different ways that colleges discount, and we don't have as loud a megaphone as the New York Times. They publish an article basically saying what we've been talking about for a while. So we want to use that as an opportunity to kind of drill down further on that. But before we do, and I think that's where we'll spend most of our time, just talk to us about the latest and greatest in kind of higher education and this administration. What do we know?
Yeah. So as I brought up last time, Senate is still deliberating on the one big beautiful bill. They're still targeting July 4th to push something through. So we'll see how that goes. No new updates from what I shared, what they were kind of grappling with and deliberating on last week. The other piece, and I will tie this into our discussion today a little bit, but Trump came out several weeks ago and said, hey, Harvard, you can't admit international students. So as a lot of things that he puts out there, there's been some back and forth with Trump put it out, Harvard sued them, the court said, hey, we're putting a hold on this. Then he did this counter, they called it a new proclamation. They've gone back and forth between Harvard, Trump, and the courts. And the upshot is it's on hold. Like the court has said, nope, Harvard can admit students, continue admitting and retaining, because that was part of it, students during the ongoing litigation. So that's a win for Harvard. It's tough because all these schools watch this, and if you're an international kid and you're looking at this, you might be a little wary in general. I know it's just Harvard and he's mad at Harvard because they didn't do what he asked. But if I'm an international kid and I'm looking, it's a different landscape than it was a year ago, right? And just for our listeners, this is big because a lot of these schools, they make a lot of money on international students because they have a different pay rate. Some schools have some aid for international, but it's nothing like what we're going to talk about today, about the discounting. So that's a big deal for the colleges, just more this uncertainty around this little piece, and then that does affect everybody else. And it's interesting because what we're going to talk about, Carp, it kind of blends in there is maybe, what we're going to talk about with Syracuse in this article.
Yeah,
Um,
I
and
have a couple. I have a
reason why
couple
they
thoughts.
did what they did. So we'll tie that in.
So I have a couple thoughts here. I mean, number one, and we talked about this last week, but my one of my biggest concerns, I have two kind of big concerns with this, and one of them is just again, just as a nation, one of our biggest differentiators is higher education. We attract the best and brightest around the world, which contributes to our society as a whole, and we all benefit from the downstream impacts of having all these amazing, again, talented individuals from all across the world. We're like an all-star team of the whole world, right? Everybody wants to come here to play basketball and go to college and play hockey and professional sports or whatever. A lot of these things, we are the mecca, right? And
Yeah.
I want it to stay that way. And the other thing here that again just kind of makes me wonder how much of a pulse the administration has with our kind of current state of the union in higher education. I think some of the mentality, and again with a lot of these things of like we're not going to outsource these opportunities to international citizens. We're going to keep it in house, keep these opportunities for U.S. citizens. Just like we're not going to let this Japanese company buy a U.S. steel company because this is America and blah blah. A similar mentality has been brought to this, right? But where I'm wondering if there's a gap, if there's a disconnect, is that number one, before we even talk about individual colleges, it's one of the biggest, kind of exports we have as an economy is education, right? People pay us tons of money to come to school here, right? And all the, again, trickle down positive impacts we get from that. And then, of course, to your point, and I know this is where you're going, at the individual school level, a lot of these colleges depend on those international dollars because to your
Yep.
point, just about all of them pay full rack rate, right? To use as a subsidy for our U.S. citizens here that can get traditional need-based specific financial aid specifically. A lot of these international kids are funding U.S. opportunities, right?
Yeah,
And
especially at the undergraduate level. I mean, PhDs, it's
right,
different. They
yep,
teach, they do whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. They've been with all the research cuts. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really changing everything. And it's a little crazy too. I read an article a while back. I don't think I shared it with you, but I mean, it was about how they saved this baby. I mean, we're getting a little off target and then I'll bring us back here, but this baby was just born and because of the 10 to 15 years of research that was majorly government funded, they saved this kid's life and did all this stuff in like 6 months that, these people are staying up all night and everything. But because of all the decade of, and they'll just be gone. I mean, and that's us, to your point, not, we're all pro America. Well, we've been around much less than the rest of the world and everybody they like our music, they dress like us. I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty crazy. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with education, but wow,
it's
we're
a
like
piece of it.
trend
Yeah.
setting things across the world, and we're young, we're babies. When you compare us to Europe and other parts of the world. So, but that could very much change, and that's where the meta level looking at what we're doing. And I think with Harvard, and this is just my opinion, but this is just all I'm mad at you because you're not acquiescing to me. So what else can I try and punish you with? That's what it is with Harvard, that he'd do it, I think, to anybody who's not doing what he wants. I think that's kind of the mentality of him as an individual across the board. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. Okay, why don't you so again, we've been talking about this for, weeks anyways, really since May 1st. But it got a, brighter spotlight put on it over the weekend or end of last week where Lieber wrote the article in the New York Times talking about Syracuse specifically. Again, I don't think I'm going off of memory here, but I'm pretty sure he didn't mention any other colleges, and certainly
nope,
it's not like
it was
it's
all
not like they were the
serious.
only ones doing it, so they did get picked on a little bit here, maybe unfairly, right? But now again, in his defense, I think they were the most kind of aggressive with
Yeah.
this. With this,
I was even all these years and I was like, wow. Well, I'll give the example. I was like, whoa, they really, some of these. Yeah. So Yeah, so there was this New York Times article. Some of our listeners, you might have seen it, but you might be reading it. And without understanding how this all works, you might have read it and it doesn't really help. So that's why, I said to Matt, hey, let's jump in and talk about this, because this is where if you kind of get to understanding this stuff, then you're more in the driver's seat. And we always say control the controllables. If you understand this, then you can play this game much, much better. So super interesting. What just so you have, if you have younger kids in high school, this has always been the deadline for kids that are seniors to say, hey, where are you going, is May 1. You send in your deposit slip, check, or whatever, ACH, whatever nowadays, and you've got your place, right? So what this article was talking about is all these families did it, right? They got into Syracuse. There were several examples in this article, got some money or literally none. One kid got none, no discount at all. So it was pay full price. They said, nope, we're passing. One person went to Pitt. One person was going to Maryland. They picked other schools, right? So after May 1, which this didn't used to happen years and years ago because they weren't allowed to do this, but we won't digress, but just there was a law that was passed that allows the colleges, we call it, Matt and I call it, they poach. They can go poach kids even though they know the kids made a decision because it's post May 1. So that's what they started aggressively doing this year, to the tune of this one, I think it was a girl, doesn't matter. They threw $20,000 a year at her and realized this is recurring. So that's a $1,000 discount. She didn't budge, family didn't budge, another 10, another 20. 50, so that's 200,000 bucks they were throwing at this student to try and entice them to come. All of the examples in the article, the families didn't budge. And I think they started and said, one of the people were quoted as saying, kind of got this weird feeling. Are they desperate? They're acting like used car salesmen. So I think it backfired. But you might have, if you read this, you might have scratched your head and said, well, what the hell's going on here? Well, and when I read this and you read it, Matt, we're all like, yep, their yields stunk. So what these colleges do is they're strategically discounting, which we're going to get into in a minute. So Syracuse had record number of applications, that they bragged about that. But then when it came to, they track it very diligently, March, April, and then this May 1, this date. And obviously they didn't have their class. They didn't have that revenue in their class. So then they're scrambling to reach back to kids. And even one of the kids in the article was like, I don't even get why they were pinging me. I feel like there were better applicants to throw money at. They're aggressively trying to fill that class. And like we say, they didn't at that point, they don't care about full pay. They just want that net revenue. Even if they're taking like this one kid, it was a huge hit, more than 50% discount. So they overplayed their hand, right? They maybe they got a little cocky. Hey, record number of applications. We don't have to be as generous. And then boom, they got stung. And it's an art. That's what they call it, enrollment management, what they do. So that's really what was going on here. So why don't you comment about the article, and then we can get more nitty gritty about what these schools do in general.
Well, I like a word that you said at the beginning here, and I think it's an appropriate mentality for consumers to have, parents to have, students and families. That's a game. You got to know how to play the game. And it's almost like, I don't know, I think that's like a healthy mindset of like, all right, I'm going to embrace what this is. And because let's be crystal clear. That's what these colleges are doing, right? And we know we run into so many families that are like, they're really hesitant to even ask for more money because they feel like it's not appropriate, or will I seem ungrateful? Will it put a black check mark on my kid, and he's going to have a lesser experience because we were the annoying squeaky wheel asking for more money, right? And it's like, guys, I promise you, the colleges are doing their version of that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just the reality, right? In any type of business, I would argue pricing strategies is one of the hardest things to do, right? And trying to predict the yield, which is why so many colleges most colleges, just exorbitant amounts of money paying these companies for data, for pricing strategies, right? All these things to help them with their enrollment management. And I think for colleges, according to, all the feedback we got from kind of our professionals in the admissions space, they were really freaked out that they were going to, I'm generalizing here with colleges, that they were going to over enroll. So we saw a ton of wait lists this year, a ton of deferments, right? For early action, early decision. We're going to defer. We're just going to wait and see. And I think kind of this strategy is with Syracuse. And again, we're picking on them. They're not alone here. They just kind of, they missed the mark, right? In terms of what they were expecting to happen. To your point, they said, okay, yeah, it's going to come, right? We're going to get the yield. May 1st comes and goes. They didn't. And so now we got to go and figure out how to fill beds. And quite frankly, I think they were desperate. I mean, I don't think,
Yeah.
again, that's not necessarily knock on the institution. That's just like, we missed the mark and we have to try to go figure it out. Now, what I will say, and it would be really interesting, I don't know that we would ever be privy to this information unless we got kind of an inside source here, but how much did this strategy cost them with folks that are going there, right? Because you better, if you're listening to this and you're a Syracuse parent, I don't care if you're a upperclassman, class of 2029, whatever, I'd be all over them going, you're giving all these kids that didn't go here an additional between $20,000 and $50,000. Mine, we're going. Right?
I agree. That's a reach out, total reach out opportunity, and just kind of play hardball. And I think too, but to tie in the news piece, if they didn't get as many international kids that they were counting on, that could be part of this. And also in the press, there's more and more information about less kids are looking at the 4-year, especially private school, $93,000 experience, full price, as something that's valuable and that there's an ROI on it. So, and there's declining enrollment. There's a lot of things. I mean, lower number of high school graduates is what I'm saying. So there's a lot of moving pieces here that can affect these colleges. I'm glad I'm not an enrollment management person, because they got to figure out a lot of stuff with a lot of uncertainty and moving pieces for sure.
Well, we were talking offline, Peggy, and it's, it's interesting because I said, Syracuse, I've just been a fan of. I think they're a great school. We've sent a ton of families there every year. I think just largely on the whole, get great kids have great experiences, graduate with great opportunities, and they're a bit of a household name specifically here in the Northeast. It's a little bit of a gamble when we price ourselves at $93,000 more than, Lieber used the example, like that's a higher price tag than MIT, right? Now, I think what makes them unique is that they're one of the few schools that has this kind of big rah-rah Division I experience, right? Great Division I sports, but they also, generally speaking, those schools are, our state flagship institutions, right? And one thing that can make them very hard from a pricing standpoint or discounting standpoint is they generally they do very little in the way of need-based financial aid. Right. Syracuse can be, if we're eligible for need-based financial aid, they can be pretty stinking generous. So it's kind of like them, Tulane, University of Miami, University of Southern California. Those are a handful that I can think of, maybe a lesser extent Michigan, that are these big rah-rah institutions, but also give meaningful discounts if we're eligible for need-based financial aid. So I think that's a differentiator from them. But again, at least this year, seem to have kind of missed the mark there and finding the sweet spot with, because again, when we think about it, what is enrollment management? And again, like most businesses, figuring out, well, how can we make as much margin as possible, but still make it palpable enough for the consumer to opt in? Right. And therein lies the game. And then when the consumer knows how to play it and knows how these different institutions work, they know how to use it, the system, the game, to their advantage. Right. And that's what we do. That's why, that's why if you kind of be in the know here, you can make sure that you get a great end result, regardless of what type of family.
Well, and like I always say, you just can't drift through this process, because you'll just be paying full price and not even knowing that there's another way. I think he said in the article, I think it was 19% pay full price. And maybe those people understood the scenario, or just like, we want Syracuse for the communication school, or whatever their reasons were. And that's fine. If somebody deems that valuable and they're doing it with their eyes wide open. But I think most families, that's not the case. And we keep saying business, like we've also referred to it like it's their business plan. You have to know these colleges' business plans, and they're not all the same. And when they give out this package, when your child gets admitted, this financial aid award, it's not just a random, every kid with these grades gets exact. It's just not. It's very strategic. And two families with the same kid, same kind of kid, but different fine. It could be an admit or a deny in certain situations, or very different packages. So as we said at the beginning, you're playing in this sandbox, you got to know where you're playing, or else, literally it's tens of thousands of dollars a year. So let's just go from this meta level and then just talk about this. We both said discounting. And, when we present, we have this slide and it shows two different schools and how one was, a state school versus a private, almost double the cost on the private school, Gonzaga in Washington. But at the end of the day, for that family, it was like $4,000 difference instead of 35, 40,000. And we make the point, this is super common, but that's what you got to understand. So when they're discounting, we're talking all about merit aid today, because that's what Syracuse came back with. Syracuse, as you said, Matt, they're a school, they meet on paper almost 100% of needs. So they probably wouldn't go back and give grants. They're giving the merit through this article. Not all schools meet 100% of need. So you can push back and say, you can push back on everything. So the discounts come from need-based aid, and we like to call them grants, just to make it an easier conversation. And then the scholarships, which is the merit-based. So that's grades, test scores, talents. What's lovely about merit is it's almost always recurring. So like I was saying, 50,000 to this one girl in the article, that's 200,000. You got to read the fine print and make sure, but most of the time it is. So that's awesome for parents that are, what's going to be my cost for 4 years with inflation? You can plan it all out. Need-based, you get a big bonus, this, that. It's going to go bye-bye, or part of it could go bye-bye. But this is what's happening, and it's just super important for you to understand the school. Like you said, they're really good at meeting need. They also offer some merit. They can be kind of stingy. A lot of schools that are great at meeting need, like the MITs of the world, we tell parents all the time, zero. Like, there's no merit. It doesn't matter if your kid's a superstar, started 5 businesses, sitting on $5 million in revenue. Like, that's lovely. And they might get in because of being a go-getter, but they're not going to reward them. It's just not their business plan. So that need-based aid at certain schools, it could be a huge windfall for certain families, but you have to know that. And you can't assume, oh, I have a lot of need. My kid has a bunch of state schools on their list. Like you said, Matt, if it's very major need, you're going to get Pell and maybe a teeny bit of money as an out-of-state kid, but probably not even any. And as an in-state, depending on the school, you might get some money. But that's a whole subset sandbox. And then there's the whole merit and how they play merit. And then the third piece, and then I'll stop rambling here, is how do you, once you get that package, how do you effectively say, well, thank you, but I want more? There's the 3 different pieces of this and maybe even you get a response from the appeal and you say, thank you, but we're going to chat again. It's a complicated process, but it's important to be in the game on it.
And I think in terms of starting the game, right? So if you're a parent that's just kind of whatever, maybe you have freshman, sophomore, junior, and you're starting to get engaged here. Like, what is my starting point, right? And I think the starting point for most people, again, specifically when it comes to the financial piece of the puzzle, is you have to figure out what is your need-based financial aid eligibility. Do you have one at all? And do not speculate, because I cannot tell you how many people correctly or incorrectly or just assume they're not going to be eligible, but guess what? They are, or vice versa. Okay.
Yeah, this is the time where family and friends are lovely, as I always say, but this is not a time or Facebook group people. Nothing against any of that, but unless you're going to put all your personal information on the table, it's not a good source for info. So sorry to interrupt, but
no, so you got to start there, right? What is my need-based financial aid eligibility if I have one? Now, even if you, and it's important, you got to do this over 4 years, because some people will say, okay, well, I'm making, $350K and I got 400,000 saved and I own my home, and like, okay, well, we're not going to get any need-based financial aid in years 1 and 2 at Tufts, but guess what? we're going to get 50 grand off in years 3 and 4 if your younger one, assuming your younger one goes off to college as well. So we got to look at this over 4 years, and there's a bunch of variables, but siblings is a good one that can be very, very meaningful. Now I use just Tufts randomly as an example because they're a college that will consider if you have more than one kid in school at once to your advantage, so to speak. Not all colleges are like that, right? So this is where it's very school specific.
That's part of the business plan again, right?
That's right. Am I eligible for need-based aid? How much? At which colleges? If I'm not, are there things that I can do to make me eligible for aid, right? Oftentimes there are strategies that we can help families implement that's going to lower their student aid index. That's the technical term that is kind of our foundation for determining this need-based aid eligibility. So that's the next thing I want to explore. Is there anything I can do to make me eligible for some or maybe a significant amount? And again, sometimes the answer is no. I found out it doesn't look good in terms of need-based financial aid. Even if I implemented a bunch of strategies, it's still not going to be enough that it makes sense to do that. So I just have confirmed that I'm not eligible for need-based financial aid. And that's okay. Right now, let's go put together a list of colleges that are going to be great fits for my kid that are going to discount based on merit. And let's make sure that we're applying to competing schools so we can leverage those against one another, right? So, and again, obviously the need-based financial families will have a different strategy in terms of creating, this affordable list of colleges that are also going to be good fits. But in terms of entering the game, that's where we need to start. Where are we at? And to Peggy, to reiterate your point, don't listen to your colleagues. Don't listen to your neighbors. Don't listen to your friends. It's not that they're trying to do you a disservice. Of course, they're trying to help, but there's just too many variables where a lot of people just assume I'm in the same bucket as person X and you're not. That's one of the hardest part of our jobs is kind of going against or whatever, trying to defeat these misperceptions and conceptions based on what, family and friends and neighbors and colleagues have experienced.
Well, and I'll just add on to that because every year since I've been in this industry, I have little conversations with parents about, again, like, I'm not eligible. I haven't even really figured that out, or even if they have. So I'm not even playing the game. I'm not even submitting forms. And we go on and on about you've got to submit your forms. You've got to submit the FAFSA for a whole bunch of reasons. And almost all the time, most families, the CSS profile, if that's required. This is all part of playing that game and being in the driver's seat. Because if you don't do that, you could potentially be off the list for merit aid, which we've been talking about here. Nothing to do with financials, but some schools like NYU, you're not even going to be looked at. So you really have to understand all these moving pieces, and that's very counterintuitive. Why would I submit forms and open up my whole financial personal life to these colleges when I know, like, say you do your due diligence and I'm not getting a dime. There's no, even if I have 2 kids in 2 years, it's just never going to happen. Well, you better make sure that you're not leaving money on the table, the other form of discounts if you don't submit. So there's just all these pieces, it's just it's complicated and no 2 schools are the same. And so it just gets a little rough. And as your bill, that's why if there's some freshman, sophomore parents on here, it's amazing because the strategies we're talking about, you could have certain kind of accounts that you want to do something with potentially before your kid's middle of sophomore year in high school, which no parent is thinking about. How am I going to leverage the most financial aid in 2 years or 2.5 years? But that's when you want to start strategizing. Just like you want to start early on the admission side to help your child build their list for the academic and personal fit, you absolutely want to look at the financial. It's not as, you're not doing it monthly, but you need to do some due diligence upfront early, and then you can put in strategies in place if applicable. And then as it comes up, like you said, Matt, you're looking at competing schools. There's all this forward thinking stuff that most people, they build this great list and then they're like, all right, now is it affordable? And that's just, then you're not in the driver's seat and you're in a position of finding out potentially none of these are affordable for us. And now we have to do weird, crazy, leverage our retirement, tell our kids no, all this stuff, or debt, right? Or massive debt. And all of it was really avoidable. It's frustrating for me. I don't know about you, Matt. When I see all this stuff and debt relief, and it's like, we wouldn't need any of that if people were able, and I know it's hard. You don't know about this stuff. So I'm not beating people up about it. But that's why we're here. Like we're putting the word out. Like you can control the controllables and you can understand this. But just like anything, you got to spend some time, you got to get some support to be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's smart things that any family, any student can implement that are just going to you get all these small victories along each of kind of the benchmarks of this process, and the end result are all great outcomes, right? We get this list of colleges. We all know they're going to be, relatively affordable. Doesn't mean we're borrowing $0, but we're not getting in over our heads. We know we've defined what getting in over our heads means, and we've all agreed as a family that this list of 12 colleges is going to work for us, right? So regardless of where we end up, right? And we've been having that conversation over the course of years, right? And again,
Yeah, you never know exactly what a college is going to do. You can't, anybody who tells you this is exact, I would run as a practitioner, but like I did it with my kids, my son. It's like, he had two schools at the end. I was like, this one's 70,000 more. They didn't give us anything. But in the conversations had been had, and he knew this is how it's going to look. It didn't mean, don't apply there because I'm not 100% sure what that school's going to do. But he knew like there's an affordability piece and the other fits. And so it was an easy conversation to have with an 18-year-old, which those aren't always easy, right? And I was like, yep, I'm going to go to this other school. I like it. And so doing this also, it just makes things much smoother with your child, which is huge. I mean, that's worth billions of dollars. You're getting to the tail end of them heading off to school and you have less stress. I mean, that's a huge win.
yeah, the really hard part is when we get accepted to the college we really like and we get the offer, and that's when we realize, oh my God, we can't afford this, or this is going to put us in huge debt. And in some situations, it can be near impossible to tell our kids no there, which I get. Right, which I get, or we follow through and we do tell them no, and it's this horrible experience, right?
Yeah.
We're doing it out of a place of love, and they're going, I earned the right to get into this college. I got accepted. Now you're telling me I can't go, right? I think, and a lot of parents feel like they didn't live up to their end of the bargain, right? I don't think that's the case, but I know that's the feeling. A lot of guilt and shame, and like it just stinks, and it's avoidable. Is it easy? No, but it's avoidable, right?
Yeah.
If we get in front of this and we're having these conversations throughout, and to your point, we can say, yeah, we can keep NYU on the list because I know you loved it, but barring the miracle, it's probably going to not be affordable for our family, right? But let's hold out for the miracle. And then when it comes, if it doesn't come to fruition, okay, this is frustrating, but it's what we expected, which is why we have these great other options, right?
Exactly. Like that's the perfect scenario. Or, hey, we know about a couple like awesome private scholarships. They're super hard to get, but if you get in, we'll be lined up. You're going to apply for these and that'll make it work. But if you don't get those, even if, it's just there's ways to do this, but you just setting those expectations is the whole thing. And then, yeah, you can avoid. I mean, I've had parents in tears with me because their kids are devastated, and yeah, it can get kind of rough, and then people aren't sleeping at night because they're making decisions to pay for schools that they can't pay for. And that gets really, and then the kids burdened with so much debt that they can't do what they want to do when they graduate college. They can't go, like I'm watching my kids, bachelorette parties and bachelor parties or weddings. I mean, it's a snowball effect. They can't be an adult because once they're done with college, because they're so straddled with debt, and worst case, they're living at home. And that's the worst for most kids. You don't want to live in your parents' basement. They want to move on and be adults, so it's not a good long-term scenario.
And let's be clear, I mean, going back to this kind of understanding where we fit within this game piece, we take this for granted just because we do this every day, but we can't repeat it enough. You certainly insinuated it earlier, but if you didn't say it explicitly, just because a school appears to be wildly expensive, and we would never spend $95,000, $100,000. You're not applying there. You're only applying to state schools. For many families, as a matter of fact, most based on kind of average demographics for Americans, those types of colleges will actually be more affordable than a lot of state schools, right? So again, counterintuitive, which is why we need to know where do we fit on the spectrum and what are the business models for each of these colleges that we may be considering, right? Because that's where, again, it can get confusing, and that's where we got to be all over it early. Another thing that you mentioned earlier that, again, we say fairly frequently, but I always think it bears repeating, for these folks that are not eligible for need-based financial aid, and there's nothing anybody can do to change that. Why would I even consider completing and submitting a FAFSA? There's a decent amount of reasons, but my kind of favorite recommendation for families that fit in this bucket is because that will make your kid eligible for the federal direct student loan, $27,000 over the course of 4 years. If you want them to have any skin in the game, great, awesome. That's a totally reasonable amount to borrow. And again, I think there's a ton of benefits from doing that. But even if you don't, even if you're saying, look, I don't need my kid to borrow, I don't want my kid to borrow, fine. Take out that loan, pay it off on their behalf. They're going to graduate with established credit. So it's a great little strategy if you're, fortunate enough to be a family that's in that scenario. So, and again, we could list others, but that's just, I always say to families, like, I get it. It's annoying to do the forms, but like, you got to tell me why it's not a good idea based on, some of the nice perks that come with it and just kind of the protecting ourselves by submitting that one.
Yeah, that's just like I said, that's part of playing this game and understanding the game. And we could go rattle off a bunch of other reasons to do that. But yeah, it's important. It's important to do that, and that's the big one that friends and family and you're mowing the lawn and your neighbor's like, don't do that. That's a waste. I did it. I didn't get anything. Well, that their scenario, their kid's scenario could be very different than yours, so that can be a big mistake. And it's lovely to go, yeah, great. John said not to do it. Off my list, but
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And you will never know. You'll never know that it's costing you.
Yeah.
But, it really could.
And just going a little bit further in the weeds here is that I think a lot of families are, and we actually should do a whole episode about this, thinking about, do I apply for financial aid or do I not? Because maybe I've confirmed that I'm not going to get any need-based financial aid, and I really did my homework, and I'm correct, right? Because there will be. So why would I apply when maybe, certainly at some colleges it will, but maybe it could negatively impact my kids just for admissions, right? And I really don't want to take that risk. This is a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too. You cannot apply for financial aid, and then after the fact, still complete the FAFSA, be entitled to that federal direct student loan program, and just take advantage of that. And again, that's kind of in that scenario where we can have our cake and eat it too, if that's a concern or one or the only reason why you don't want to mess with doing the FAFSA.
Yeah. In that case, you just don't worry about the priority deadline. You just get it in before the loans are dispersed, which is way down the road way after May 1, and the colleges start to put together the bills and stuff. You just need to get it in. And yeah. So again, all these little nuances.
Exactly.
Of the game, that you just won't necessarily know. Because if I'm talking to a big crowd, I say, get that puppy in, there's priority deadlines, do it a week before, because I'm speaking to the masses and I don't want people to lose out on need-based aid. But that's not necessarily applicable to everybody.
That's right.
Everybody's unique. And even like I said, with my two, it was different with my two kids. I still couldn't look at it the same. They were going to get different they applied to some of the same schools and got in, and we were not offered the same money. They're different kids, even though obviously my husband and my finances were the same. Yep. It's not one size fits all. So I think, just to kind of say, hey, summarize, you've got to know your student aid index, and we're not here to plug, College Aid Pro, but we do have free software, mycap.collegeaidpro.com. You get in there, we will tell you your two student aid indexes, and you can put in 3 schools, and you can see that net revenue that we keep talking about. You got to do that, and then you need to know, are there any strategies to lower it? You got to maximize your merit opportunities. And that's part of forward thinking. You mentioned it, Matt, competing schools. And every time you mention that in a webinar, right in the Q&A, right away. Well, what's a competing school to this? How do I know? Like people don't, it's a great question. They don't even know how to find competing schools, let alone know that they should be doing that. And then the final thing is always realize when you think you're at the end and you get an offer and you get money or you don't, it's not the end. You're still playing the game. You're still appealing. You're still reaching out. You're still potentially using another school to do it in the right way, not negotiating, not buying a car. But so you're really not done until you're really, really done. So those are kind of those five takeaways in my mind from what we've chatted about here.
Yeah, totally same page. And by the way, I will give us a shameless plug. We are the #1 rated college planning software, and if you decide to upgrade to premium, all the bells and whistles, $4.99 a month, so $5 a month.
No
If you can't,
contracts,
no contract, cancel anytime. If you can't afford $5 a month, you just write into support@collegeaidpro.com. You tell us, we'll get you on there for free. Or if you're a free and reduced lunch family, same deal, we'll get you on there for free. Obviously, we ask that you be truthful. It's not something we vet or anything like that. But otherwise, $5. But again, at a minimum, to Peggy's point, you have to. That's where the game starts, and that's kind of my messaging is you got to get in the game. Okay, embrace that. There's if you can embrace it, there's an element of, I don't know, enjoyment here. We're kind of like competing in some ways, right? Because I promise you, the reason why we have this insane student debt is because so few people get in the game. They just, to use Peggy's word, they just drift. We're kind of on autopilot. We're just kind of following the lead of the students and the school counselors that are doing their best for them. That you are at a competitive disadvantage, and the colleges, I promise you, are very in the game. That is a guaranteed. So you have to just know that and do something about it. And hopefully these are some practical steps, right, that can help you get started. Go to collegeaidpro.com, listen to us, right? Go to our events. We have a ton of, all we do every single week, multiple times a week, is try to, educate our tribe.
Free events, and they're all recorded. So if you can't make it live, we love our live audience and we reward them. We do. But you don't, people have a lot going on. You don't even have to be live, but just again, that's the theme today, be in the game.
In the game.
Yeah, or else you are going to lose the game. That's financially, right. You are. Your kids might get in. You might play the admissions game well, but it might end up being a loss because you can't afford it, or you buy it and then you can't afford it and it's a loss because you're going into extreme debt, so. Yeah,
well, and look, at you guys are in good hands. We love this. We live for it. Literally, this is our livelihood, is being in this game. And so again, follow our lead, and we're happy to play this part. If you got any value out of the podcast, please share it, like it, follow it. We're always very grateful if you have right into us. We listen to you guys. Support at collegeaidpro.com to say, I think somebody recently had a bunch of questions around 529s. We spent an episode or two unpacking 529. So we are very much listening to you and want to make sure that we're talking about what's keeping you up at night.
Yeah.
And
let us know if there's anything, that is keeping you up at night. We're happy to jump in and get into it, get in the weeds on it. That's what we love to do. So happy to do it. So next week is holiday week, 4th of July. So happy 4th to everybody down here in Tucson. There will be, I don't think there's going to be many fireworks because it's extremely dry. So this is my first year here, Matt. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm sure there's not going to be any neighborhood ones because, it would be a bit crazy with the dryness. But everybody, have a lovely holiday. Well, we probably won't shoot next week because it's a holiday week. Everybody, I think a lot of people are going to do a vacay, right? Because you got that Friday off.
I am, girlfriend.
Had a great long weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a great 4th, everybody. Appreciate you listening in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Take care.
Okay, thanks for joining today's podcast, hosted by myself, Matt Carpenter, and my co-host, Peggy Keogh. Once again, produced and edited by Eileen Campbell. If you like today's episode, please follow us, please like us. Better yet, please share it, and we will see you in a couple weeks. This is special.